Waiting for some more folks to join in. We have a sizable crowd, and this week I was actually able to get our Facebook Live working. So if you're on Facebook and you want to share this with other folks who aren't on Zoom, or you don't want to mess with sending the link or anything, you can share, and you could even create a watch party. It's on the little share tab on Facebook, and that way all of your followers know that this is something you're tuning into, and perhaps it's something that they would find some interest in. So let's give it a little bit of time, and then I'll dive right in. It's going to be a very short presentation today, just about 30 minutes or so. Realistically, I ran through it this morning. It looks like I'm going to only take about 20 minutes to do the presentation. After that, you can ask all the questions you want. Maybe I'll know the answer, maybe not, but I will figure it out, and I'll get that information to you because what we're talking about is so important. So with that, let's just get started. I hope everybody can hear me, see me, adjusting the lights. It's a new normal, and there's lots of little things to consider when we're doing these webinars. And so each week, my hope is that I can make it a little bit better for all the people tuning in. So thanks so much for tuning in yet another time. Our previous webinars include how our state government works, talking about the different chamber systems, who has the power. If you're a regular just community member and you want to engage, what does that look like? So you can find that on our Facebook or our YouTube. Another one we did was with our educators. Last week, I had a really fantastic panel with Tammy Thomas, Amanda Aragon, and Jenna Hagen-Gruber, I'm sorry. And they talked about all the challenges we're facing in education in New Mexico, not only because we're quite frankly, the bottom of nearly every education list, but with the issues of COVID-19 being added into the mix, what does that mean for our kids? So those previous webinars, you can look on our YouTube, look on our Facebook, and you can watch them. But today, we're here to talk about something else. But first, let me introduce myself. If it clicks, there we go. My name is Rhiannon Samuel, and I am the Executive Director of Viante, New Mexico. Viante, New Mexico is a nonpartisan nonprofit that seeks to provide transparency and accountability to our state lawmakers. We're trying to seek out solutions that are common ground, that don't have a party affiliation attached to them, and give credit to the lawmakers who are working together to not only vote on those bills, but to sponsor them. We also look at their attendance. No one else does that. Prior to our work, we had seen some legislators that just weren't showing up. And now that we're keeping an eye on it, that behavior is changing. So if you're interested, tune into YTNM.org, see all the stuff we're working on. In fact, we just released our scorecard earlier this week. I'll be doing a presentation next week about it. I'm so excited to share the results with you. So tune into that webinar, and we'll get you some more information to help you in voting. So that's me, Rhiannon Samuel, Executive Director. I also have Anna Mallory. She is our Community Outreach Manager. She helps set up a lot of things, keeping us engaged with our community, keeping our ears to the ground around what people want to see and what they want to learn more about, which leads me to talk about what we're going to discuss today. We are talking about why should I participate in the primary? I had heard from a few folks that if they already had their presidential nominee, whether they're Republican and it was already assumed it was President Trump, or if you're a Democrat and that field of about 30 candidates has already whittled down to Vice President Joe Biden, former Vice President Joe Biden, why should they waste their time, whether it be going into voting booth where we're a little nervous right now going into the public, or why waste the time to get an absentee ballot? And when I heard those comments, my radar just peaked. I'm kind of a political nerd, and which has not always been the case, but what I have come to find out is these primaries are incredibly important for a myriad of reasons, and your voice in them counts so much more than I think a lot of people assume or know. So that's what we're talking about. We're going to look at important dates around the election this year. What is a primary and how is it different from a caucus? If you watch national news, you may have heard about the kerfuffle that happened with the Iowa caucuses. And what is the difference? Why do we have two different forms? And is one more powerful than the other? We're going to talk about New Mexico's primary challengers, and that's really more about what the climate of New Mexico's primary season is like, and what kind of things you're going to see on your ballot, and why you as a New Mexican should pay attention to those issues and those folks. What's in it for you? So if you take your time to go and vote, or you do the absentee ballot route, what are you getting out of this, and what are others getting out of you participating or not participating? And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit more about the general election and how this plays into that and the significance of this primary season to that general election. So without further ado, let's dive in. Important dates. Oops, back. There you go. First and foremost, May 5th, that's when absentee ballots started to be mailed out. My husband is registered with a political party. I am not. I'm an independent. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But he already received his absentee ballot. He can already take time with it, look up the candidates, and really vote based off of an understanding and an education around those folks, rather than going into the voting booth and perhaps seeing them for the first time. So many of those people who have already requested their absentee have received it in the mail, and you can start voting now. Jumping ahead a little bit, you need to have those into the mailbox back to the Secretary of State or your county clerk by May 28th. Everything is prepaid, and so it's really as simple as filling it out, putting it in that envelope, and sending it back. So that's happening right now. Going back a little bit, May 16th, that is when early voting has started, and that's tomorrow. That was something that was a point of contention. It was a case brought up to the Supreme Court. If you want more information on what happened there, why we have early voting, and how many sites we have, I addressed that in a conversation 2 weeks ago about absentee ballots and mail-in ballots, talking about that. So tune back into that webinar to find out more information. Finally, our primary election. So that's the day where it's the very last time to get your vote in, is June 2nd. So that's coming up quickly. Please make a decision what you want to do, whether it be absentee, early voting, or if you want to go on that actual election day. But please make a plan and move forward. Then this is all leading up to November 3rd, which is our general election. And this year is so important. I cannot stress that enough. We have presidential candidates on the ballot. We have congressional folks. We have a senator here in New Mexico that we're voting for. And for me, what I think is just as important, if not more important, we have all 112 of our state legislators on the ballot. So all state reps, all state senators are up for election. 77% of those races are contested, whether it be in the primary or the general, and we have the potential of having a whole new legislative body, and what that is going to look like depends on you and me and how we act now. So what is a primary election? So primary elections are often just called primaries, are the process by which people can indicate their party preferences for folks that they want to see in the general election. This can happen in local, this can happen in federal elections, it can happen at every level. And it is a unique system to each state. Each state can do something different, which is called a primary or a caucus. I'm going to talk about those differences, and then I'm going to talk about the nuances between the primaries. So we'll start with caucuses, because that was the very first one we had this year with Iowa. This is kind of a ranked choice voting, where folks show up to a designated location within their precinct, and they get to gather in groups of the candidates they want to support. And it goes in different rounds. In this sort of form, the different people can convince you to go towards their candidate or to not support a candidate. It's really open, and then once a vote or like a tally is taken, they weed out the low performers, and then those folks that were in the initial groups get to redistribute themselves. And this is all based off of personal preference. So let's say, we'll talk about the Democrat primary. We had a really crowded field, and we had folks like Sanders, Klobuchar, Kamala Harris, Buttigieg. And so if, let's say, Buttigieg was your favorite from the get-go, like you want him to be president, he was in your initial group, and you stand with those folks. The people who are managing that caucus go around, count people up, and in this example, let's say Buttigieg did not get enough votes. And so from that point, you're left to decide, okay, well, who is my second choice? Then you go and gather in that group. And all the while, there's people who are going to be shouting and cheering for their candidates and trying to convince you to come over. And so it's a very exciting way to do it. But the challenges are, what if you can't make it in that to that time or that place? What if you have physical ailments that don't allow you to participate? So it can be a little bit restrictive. Iowa tried to address that with a different kind of electioneering platform to tally things and allow people to do it kind of like by absentee voting, but it got a bit messy. I won't go into it here because that's not really applicable to New Mexico, but that's the other system. Primaries run very much like a general election, but each state has their different nuances too. But here for New Mexico, we are a primary state, and we run just like a general election. Another nuance is a state party has a lot of say on who is going to be considered. So there were a few states who had Republican presidential people who wanted to run against President Donald Trump. The state party can say whether or not they want to hold their primary, and some said no. Even if you filed your candidacy, we're not having an election, and so it's just going to be President Trump for our state as our Republican nominee. So differences all around. And then on this graph on the left-hand side of your screen, it shows you which are primaries, which are open. And I want to talk about what is the difference between open and closed primary. This is particularly important to me as an independent because I am not able to vote in the primary because I'm not registered as a Republican or a Democrat. In other states, they can, you can say what you are or you can not say what you are. How do I phrase that better? You can say, I want to vote in the Democrat primary or the Republican primary, and cast your ballot along those lines. New Mexico is not one of those. There have been several bills in the past that would allow independents to declare or to state which one they want to vote in, but they didn't make it far in the legislature because that is a policy that needs to happen there. In New Mexico too, we're unique in that we had, this data is from a bit before, so it's from February, and I took that snapshot because people may change their party affiliation to vote in a primary, but based off of February numbers, 1 in 5 New Mexicans are registered as independents. So that means 1 in 5 people in New Mexico who perhaps want to vote cannot. So that's something that's being talked about often. We'll see where the state legislature goes with that, but certainly something to consider. Now, the history of voting in New Mexico. So these are the results based off a county in the 2016 presidential race, which was our very last one, where it was Clinton versus Trump. What you can glean off of this map is that our more urban areas like Albuquerque, Las Cruces, Santa Fe, they tend to lean more Democrat. And in our more rural parts of the state, we have more Republican representation. But because we have such a vast majority of our population in our urban centers, New Mexico will typically go the route of those more populous areas in terms of a party affiliation. And that is historically the case for federal races. Certainly we've seen different nuances with our governorship, with Governor Susana Martinez winning as a Republican in what was presumed a blue state, Governor Gary Johnson. So this is not a steadfast rule, but I like this graph to show that New Mexico is so different. And as the 5th largest state, we have such a difference in belief systems and ideologies that really come to light in elections. And the more people that vote, the more representative our government is of what our wish is. But if you don't, there's a lot of voices that can be lost in the mix, whether it be like if our urban areas, for whatever reason, decide not to turn out and vote as much, perhaps more of the rural New Mexico will have a say in who represents us, or vice versa. So it's really important that folks get engaged and they look at what they care about and make sure their voice is heard. What does it look like historically in New Mexico when it comes to who's represented us? So this graph is going back to 1950, and it shows who has had control of the Senate chamber, the House chamber, and the governor's seat. And within the last 38 years, or in the last, how many years is that? 50, so many years, we have had 38 years of Democrat trifectas. And that means that we had a Democrat governor, Democrat majority rule in the Senate and in the House. So our state has historically been very, very blue. There has never been a chance or an opportunity for Republicans to do that. And that could be for a variety of reasons, but I just find this graph so interesting to just show who has had the most power for the longest time, good, bad, or otherwise. In the second graph, this is produced by the Rio Grande Foundation of New Mexico. They're a more conservative think tank. They took the data even further, back to 1931. And what they show in their data and their research, that there has been 60 years of Democrat trifectas. And there's just been a lot of representation from one party as opposed to the other. So really fascinating data, not characterizing it as good or bad. Again, you can make up your own mind on that, but something just worth noting as you are going to the voting booths. Is this something that you want to see continued, or is this something you want to see changed? Let that be a factor in what you want to decide for you and your families. So this year is so important. We have Democrat majority in both the House and Senate. And what that looks like is a 46 to 24 edge in the House and a 26 to 16 advantage in the Senate. So Democrats have a very, very big control in both of those chambers. But what had been happening is there were divisions within the party where there were more new age, more progressive Democrats coming into the mix and mingling with older Democrats who have been there for a while and perhaps are a bit more on the conservative side, but they're still Democrats. And those progressives did not like that. The person that you're seeing on your screen right now is Senator Mary Kay Papen. She has been in the Senate for a very long time. She's based out of Las Cruces, and she has not always voted with the party's wishes. She bases her votes on her constituency, and that sometimes upsets her party. In fact, for the past couple of years, there have been abortion bills that have come out, and the Democrat Party has been very progressive on that issue, but she votes them down. And so a lot of these Democrats are being targeted by members of their own party who want to see them out. They say, you're a Democrat in name only. And Senator Mary Kay isn't alone. We have Senator John Arthur Smith, who runs our Senate Finance Committee. We have a new senator, Gabriel Ramos, who's there, and there's less of an appetite for division within the party, and the newer Democrats and these more progressive tangent are looking to to change that dynamic to more like-minded individuals within the party. And so they're seeing primary challengers and pretty nasty primaries. And so if these are folks in your ballot, pay attention. Do you like what they've done in the past? Do you not? You can tune into Viante's scorecard to see their behavior when it comes to voting with members of the opposite party and to fix our education, crime, and quality of life issues. So very interesting election cycle here in New Mexico, and one that I'm very excited to see how it all plays out. So moving beyond the primaries, what is this all for? This is for the general election. Here are the 2016 presidential results with the Electoral College votes. And I wanted to take a quick moment to talk about the Electoral College, where somebody may win the popular vote. When it comes down to the Electoral College, they may lose. And this map illustrates how many delegates come from these states. And on my social media, it comes up every general election where folks will say, we need to do away with the Electoral College. It's not fair. It's not the will of the popular vote of all the people in America. Why do we even have it? So I wanted to take a brief moment to say that the Electoral College is in place for states just like New Mexico. If you compare us to someone like California, if California and New York both want to have a one candidate person or like one candidate to win, and New Mexico wants someone different, our 5 Electoral College votes are a moot point. They won't make a difference. Or I mean, our populist votes, sorry, because we have such a low population here. We have about 2 million people. And so that's where our Electoral College comes into place. So those populist places on the East and West Coast, they may have the popular vote, but New Mexico's voice is more fairly heard in this system. And that's true for a lot of our Midwestern states where we have lower populations. This Electoral College makes sure that we can say what we want is just as valid as those states. I could go and do an entire webinar on the Electoral College where I didn't flub like I did earlier, but I will save you that snooze fest. But if it's something you're interested in and want to talk to me about, let me know. I would love talking with you. So what does our voter turnout look like? This is data based off of our general election numbers, and primary are generally much lower. But I think this is a great indication of where we're at as a country. When it comes to developed nations, the United States is not doing well. Here's where we're at on the list, near the bottom for our voter participation. To me, that's embarrassing. And I'm sorry if that offends you, but it's something we need to encourage our family, our coworkers, our friends to start engaging with, because we're just above 50% participating, and that's eligible voters. So it's not good. Now, what does it look like for New Mexico? In our general election voter turnout, trying to keep the data the same, so I'm looking again at 2016, we were at 54.6% of our eligible voting population. That does not even include, that's more than our registered voters. So it looked at our population, and anybody who was a citizen over 18, that's who they captured. But even of that number, not everybody is registered. So this number is staggering to me. We often question why things are happening at the state and federal level that we disagree with. If it's stay-at-home orders now with COVID-19, is it taxing, is it the education system? This number is why that's the case, because we did not go through and make sure that people were elected to powerful positions that were going to execute on things we wanted to see. So if we want to see a change, we need to bump this number up, not only as a state, but as a country. Now, the primaries, this is where New Mexico was at, 22.6% in our primaries. So bad. That's so, so bad. So we need to improve that this year. And I've seen news reports as late as this morning on how it looks like we might surpass our absentee ballot requests. And so I'm so hopeful that we can increase this number so we can actually see the changes that we want in our state. So let's boil this all down. Why should you participate? One, you need to have a say in the direction that your party is headed. If you're a Democrat, and perhaps you're more of a conservative Democrat, but you're not liking the policies that are coming about in Washington, you think they're too progressive, or there's voices like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, and you're not a fan of her, perhaps. It's on you to start electing people that are more representative of how you think your party should go. So that's where you have a say. If you're going to complain, do something about it, in my opinion. Now, there's also the familiarity with down ballot issues. Not only are you going to see the legislators, as I have talked extensively about, or the presidential candidates, you're going to see judges and public regulation committee members and different offices that have a say in your everyday life that you should have a say into. It strengthens our democracy. And that goes right back to, if we want to see changes and we want to go back to something, your voice needs to be represented through voting in order for that to happen. Our democracy is only as strong as we participate in it. So please consider that. And it helps determine resources. So let's say you don't have any contested races on your ballot and it's all just one candidate, but your voting is counted as voter participation. And different campaigns will look at those numbers to figure out how they can allocate resources to make their candidate win or to make someone lose. So you need to not allow them to skew the numbers in their favor. So that's why you need to participate. And just requesting absentee ballots. This is an odd slide. It wasn't in there initially. I'm sorry. This is the slide that I wanted. So the Secretary of State's website is very easy. Put in your information, request your absentee ballot sooner rather than later, and you can go to nmvote.org. Now, again, those important dates. May 5th, absentee ballots are already going out. You can vote now. Tomorrow, early voting starts. If you need help finding your voting locations, please send me an email. I'd be happy to help you out and get you in the right direction. May 28th, if you're that person that wants to do absentee, it's the last day to mail it back. And then finally, June 2nd, that is the primary. And November 3rd, general. So to help you in all of this, Viante has created a scorecard. If you're unsure of those folks who are actually showing up for the job and who are working together, that's what we have articulated in a very simple to understand scorecard. And we're going to talk about it next week in our webinar. If you want to see it now, go to YTNM.org. Please consider supporting our work. We are a grassroots organization. We do not accept money from businesses or organizations to sustain our operations. So through your membership dollars that give you access to that scorecard, I'm able to do these webinars. I'm able to go up to Santa Fe and look for bills that are going to be impactful to our family and our friends and our community and share it with you. So help us out, please, and we'd love to have you. I have just like 1 or 2 minutes left because I spoke longer than I anticipated. But if you have questions, let me know. I will give a moment for you to type those out either in the chat box, or Anna, who's tuning into our Facebook Live. Has anybody tuned in there, Anna? Go ahead and send me a text. While I'm waiting for that to come in, again, thank you so much for taking your time to tune in. These webinars have been much more successful than we ever anticipated. And we're excited to share more with you. If there's things you want to learn more about too, let us know, and we would be happy to address those. I am looking right now. Let's see. Q&A. I think we're good on questions. That doesn't mean you may not have a question that you're thinking about and you just haven't asked. So send me an email at info@viantenm.org. Be happy to help you out. But thank you for tuning in this week. It's been really fun to share these things and these new topics with you. And I'll see you next week, next Friday, 10 a.m. Put on your calendar. We're going to talk about Viante's scorecard. We're going to share results. You'll see how they're working together or not, and what you can do with that.